Welcome back to GynoCurious. I'm your host, Dr. Amy Novatt. From both sides of the speculum, we explore what it means to be a healer and to be healed. Power. It's one of those words that can feel rather charged, ambiguous, even uncomfortable, especially for women. Yet whether we like it or not, power is woven into every aspect of our lives, in our relationships, our workplaces, our finances, and our health. Research in psychology, sociology, and leadership studies consistently shows that men and women often express and relate to power in different ways. These aren't hard rules, and sometimes there's overlap, but the patterns are worth noticing because how we relate to power can shape how we relate to our bodies, our healthcare, and the people who care for us. Here on GynoCurious, we've looked at how health is influenced by so much more than biology. The way we navigate relationships, money, exercise, even how we show up in the doctor's office. All of it affects how we seek out or avoid healing. So today I want to explore power, not just in the traditional sense of leadership or status, but as a lens to examine health. Do you wield power through relationship and collaboration, or through structure and authority? Do you build rapport with your healthcare team, or do you trust expertise and command? Are you cautious with your body, or do you take risks? And most importantly, do you see yourself as having power over your body or power with it? Because that difference, at least for me, between domination and partnership can change everything in how we heal, how we care for others, and how we step into our roles as both patients and practitioners. Please let me know your thoughts on the show or other episodes by writing to comments@radiofreerhinecliff.org. Please share the show with others and give us 5 stars so that others can continue to find the show on their apps. And if you're interested in learning more about my clinical practice, please go to my website, dramynovatt.com. Today's guest is Ana Barreto. Ana is a Brazilian-American author, speaker, and transformational teacher who is dedicated to empowering women to find balance and fulfillment. She brings over 35 years of business experience with a bachelor's degree in business and an MBA. She has worked in the hospitality industry, in the lodging and restaurant sectors in the U.S. and abroad. Welcome, Ana. Thank you for being with me today.
Thank you, Amy. I'm so happy to be here.
I've just learned from Ana that she and I have met years ago, and I didn't even realize it. I kind of love that. We had a very interesting session with a group of women working around energy and spirit, and quite wonderful. So lovely to have you in this space. I'd like to start with kind of the arc of your work, an MBA, and then a transformational healer, teacher who writes about power, energy, feng shui. This is an interesting path. Yeah. Can you share kind of the arc and how this all came to be?
Yes. So I tell people that your purpose is your life. Your purpose is all about your life. And if you ask me 30, 40 years ago, I would be here doing exactly this. Absolutely not. I had no idea. I was born in Brazil and came to New York 37 years ago, actually, last week, just to be here for 6 months. It was supposed to be an adventure, make some money, improve my English. And then things happened. I had a number of women who saw potential in me, who told me that I got to go to college. I was just 20. And that's what I did, from one path after the other. I was 26. I didn't know what to do. And you had to declare a major. Back then, I was working as a housekeeper, babysitter, dog walker, and I couldn't afford to go to college. So I had to go part-time at our community college and pay out-of-state tuition. But when I got into marketing and management, I learned that I've been doing this, for a few years already when I was working in Brazil. And that was it. So from one path to another, I got to work for hospitality again. I got married, had kids, work pretty much in male-dominated situations. I knew that something wasn't quite right, but I went to school at a women's school, Marymount College back then in Tarrytown. Yes.
Yeah.
And I was part of Fordham. And I learned about the rights of women, the powers of women. And from that point, when I read books about incredible thinkers of the time, what they thought of women, used to boil my blood.
Mm.
And I knew, growing up in a society where women had no rights, my dad used to come home and bring in the clothes and the curtains. My mother never chose anything. Everything was chose for us. That's when I started learning that it has to be something better. When I think about back then, I felt that there has to be more to this world. And then that became my life because I was very good at what I did in managing teams, managing people. When I got promoted a couple times and was fast, I wanted to be a different leader.
Mm.
And, getting an MBA helped me get there faster. But I still was in a room full of men. I was the only woman in the room so often. And the messages that came out of there, the conversations they had, the decisions they made, it just didn't agree with me. And I got divorced. So I was always connected to spirituality. I started meditating when I was 13 years old, on and off. And I knew that when I meditated, everything was going to kind of go my way.
Mm.
When I didn't, things will go off. So all the teachers kind of came to my life by accident. My first mindfulness was a book when I was 13, my brother had given to me. Then was a book on feng shui. Then was a meditation teacher. So that's how my life unfolded. The great thing is that it looked like there were two separate paths, the mindfulness and the business. But if I didn't have the mindfulness, I could not have done the business.
Mm.
If I didn't have the mindfulness, I could not be a single mom of two, fully responsible for my kids and travel, had big jobs. And I couldn't really manage all of those if it wasn't for mindfulness. And that's what I learned, that I got to do something. I got to do something about it. So I always thought that my books were going to be all about business. I had a number of books that I began but never finished. Was women in business. I knew it had to be women in business, so on. But when I looked at myself and I found fully embrace my purpose, my power, I realized this was about women, mindfulness, and empowerment. This is what has been the theme of my life. This is what the theme of my books. I always write for women. And I really wanted to make a difference in the world, even if I am cutting 50% of the population, like my editors advised me not to.
Mm. It's so interesting because analogously, when I started GynoCurious, I thought I would have male guests. And very quickly, I decided, I had one in the very beginning. And then I decided very quickly, no, I didn't want that I wanted this to be a forum that women get to be the guests, be the teachers, be the receivers of information. And yeah, it might be cutting off 50% of the population, but quite frankly, I'm proud to stand tall in this forum and say I'm speaking to people who identify as women, and we'll go from there.
Yeah. And it's I got a lot of flashbacks, especially when I used to write, when I actually published a couple of meditation that was just for women and inspirational talks for women. I got some kind of hate mail kind of thing.
Oh, gracious.
Yes. But there are other people, the other men that were very gracious and said, this really correlates to men as well. But I feel that there's so much information, books and resources for men. It's time for women it's our time. It's time for us to teach, like I said, listen to, hear, and not to say, I had mentors. There were men that gave me, especially back then. And I'm not that old, but back then when I started, all the bosses were male, and all my beginning mentors were all male that, told me, do this, don't do that, do this, don't do that. Later on, I did have some women mentors that guided me in one way or another. But I think it's time for us to have more women in power, empowered to be and do what they really need to do. And right now, let me tell you, the way I see the world now, especially here in America, we need more female energy in this world.
Yeah. And to speak just a little bit further before my next question, I have no doubt that as women leadership takes hold, it's going to be the right thing for the whole entire world, men, women, non-binary, et cetera, et cetera. So this isn't only about taking care of one group of folks.
Yeah.
It's about the world at large. So empowerment, you've used that word a couple of times, and it's a word that's getting a lot of play. Can you define it for us? I know that it seems simplistic, but what does it mean to you to be empowered?
For me, empower means to own my own power, my own energy. What I learned and over the years working with a lot of women is that we give our power away, unknown to them, to ourselves. I'm sure I have done many, many times. I gave my power away. And now, when you talk about leadership, what I notice is that women now have two paths. They either completely ignore everything that they want to do, or they bite the bullet and muscle through what they want to do, what they think that they want to do. Now, the women who are giving up, they saw what they saw and they said, this is not for me, and kind of put their ambitions on a shelf, and maybe someday, but not now. And not because of they had children, because, there was some illness in the family. They just decided, I don't know, I don't like what I see. I want to put myself out there. And on the other side, the women who said, I'm going to do this. I'm going to power through. And the results is that they get burned out. So there is I think, a space in between. And this is, I think the true meaning of empowerment, where, we are congruent with what I think, what I feel, what I do, is in that space. But if I want to do something and I feel that I have a belief that is not matching what I want to see, then I'm just going to either give up or muscle through it. And that is really, part of my message, where let's find the harmony first, the inner harmony, the inner power. And then from there, we can go outwards.
Yeah. It again reminds me of, in a way, healthcare. Folks will either ignore all their symptoms, so that's kind of like giving up the power entirely, or they muscle through it in a way that's exercising for an hour every single day, starving their bodies, doing all kinds of fad diets, and pushing through in a way that is, in fact, depleting them and not listening to their body. And that the empowerment comes from taking a moment, listening to the body, listening to the symptoms, inquiring about them, learning from them, and, moving forward. Yeah. It's interesting because I was just thinking about first of all, I want to let everyone know out there that Ana has written 9 books. I don't know how you've been so prolific. I've been working on one for the last 15 years. So I just applaud you. Do you enjoy the writing process?
That's a trick question. Because I tell you, all the books, the ideas that come to me, it comes either in meditation or after meditation. I'm an avid meditator for the past 10 years, I want to say. So it comes to me, and then I don't feel the pressure to do it. But since I took an early retirement from my company and I have more time, I felt like, I'm going to write way more books. And this is really not the truth. So there is such a thing as inspiration, but I feel that I am fulfilling some big of a mission. And especially when I go and edit my work before I send to somebody else, I really don't remember writing whatever I wrote here. So this is beautiful. Yeah. And so I know that there's a higher power type of work.
Mm.
So I'm embracing the time that they're giving me, But when I'm in the flow, I can be in my office for a good 5 hours. I like to get up in the morning and go to write before, I go downstairs, get a cup of tea. My office is on the third floor of our house. And I'll tell my husband, don't come up,
Right.
close the door, and I can be there for 2 hours or 5 hours and then, get up and start, the rest of my day, do what I have to do. And there are days that I don't go up at all. Maybe because there's something else that I need to do. But when I'm in it, I'm in it.
Yeah,
And then,
people talk about that flow. It's
Yes,
really
yes.
something, and everybody has a slightly different way of describing it,
Yeah.
but it's I've heard other writers say, I look back on my work and I'm like, I don't even remember writing it. It just
Yeah.
came out.
Yeah.
So one of the books that you wrote is called Breaking Free from Self-Sabotage. We often talk about self-sabotage and how it relates to relationships, but do you think it's a stretch and how it interfaces with our health?
No,
Yeah.
no.
Can you talk about that,
Yes.
please? Yeah.
Actually, in this book, I list 50 common modern ways that people self-sabotage.
Mm.
And health is one of the areas. Now, if you talk to them, if you ask, because once you are aware of seeing those type of patterns and behavior, if you ask them, are you self-sabotaging? And they will give you 50 explanations, maybe not 50, but they'll give you all the explanations why they're not. They have logical reasons why it's not self-sabotage. Is whatever excuse, is the doctor, is the time, is the health system, whatever it is, but it's not them. And in reality, I mean, one of the things that self-sabotage is that women do a lot is self-care. I mean, we are so important. Self-care is women's number one priority because there are so many people that depend on us that when we are not well, everybody around us is not well. And sometimes we think like it's okay, my kids need it, my mother needed it, my neighbor needed it, I'm needed. I can't take the time to go to this doctor. I cannot time to take this test. I have to cancel my appointment. And in all, we are just not serving.
I was thinking about all the reasons that I hear in my office as to it's often about, well, it's about a lot of things, but it's often about weight and exercise and nutrition. And I was thinking, gosh, I hear it so often, this self-sabotage phenomenon. Like, does it have some evolutionary benefit? Is it allowing women to do all the work that they do and take care of everybody, and that's why it's come to be? Or is it really just a result of the deeply embedded social norms and the patriarchy, et cetera? And, as a biologist, I think about, is there some genetic value to this? I couldn't come up with it really, but your thoughts about that? Because it's so prevalent. It's so prevalent.
I believe it's inherited. And even if we put a child in an island, no contact with other women, and this girl, as she grows up, will do that kind of thing. I think it's inherited. It's inherited from, we got it from our mothers, our grandmothers, great grandmothers. It's there. Nobody told you don't take care of yourself. We learned this by osmosis, and I do believe that, like you said, we should have evolved over this, right? But we are creatures of comfort. It is comfortable just not upset the core, just stay in this comfort space. So we don't have to do more. We don't have to think. I mean, our brain alone doesn't want us to expose ourselves because they already figured out. You get up in the morning, you brush your teeth, you take a shower, you get your dress, you get in your car, you go to work. So if you do something else, okay, I don't know what to do here. I don't know what to do here. And the brain main function is to protect us, is to streamline all this stuff. And if the brain doesn't have to learn another way of doing it, okay, everything's good. Everything's good. And that's why when we try to do something for a day or two or three, And the brain is going to come up with all these excuses, which it is a type of self-sabotage. And at the end, I mean, my research, when I looked through it, because even after I wrote my first book and I was going through the self-sabotage, I mean, I didn't go as deep as I went onto this book. I just mentioned self-sabotage, but I lived it through over and over. And if you ask me then, I had all the logical reasons why it wouldn't be, I shouldn't be, or it doesn't have to be. And at the end of the day, when you take the pain and the limiting belief, which is a big one, the fears that is there hidden somehow, something that we learn that will tells the brain that, all right, so we're not going to the doctor. It could be that I don't want to hear that I have this illness. I don't want to have to take time off from work because I'm the supporter of the provider of the house. I don't want to have to tell my friends that I have this. So there is a million of excuse that the brain would come up not to do this. But at the end of the day, we're not serving ourselves.
No, of course not. Yeah. And is it fair to say that women, cis, trans, or non-binary are more prone to self-sabotage than male-identified persons, or do you think it's across the board?
Look, I have found male who self-sabotage, and I coach them too, men and women. What I learned is that male are so much easy to take the new thought, the new mindset, and roll with it.
Interesting.
And the women will take it, will question, will stay in limbo for a little bit before they take the path, and we can tell, I mean, the boy, okay, you can do anything. And they take it, they roll it. Okay, I'm going to do it, even if they are not ready. I mean, there are studies and studies that talks about that, where men and women, same experience, education, they take a test. And at the end of the test, they ask the men, so how do you think you did? And they said, oh, I aced it. They ask the women, I don't know. I think, I did okay. Then when we look at the results, the women did better than the men. So there is something there,
Yeah.
And this study has been duplicated so many times.
Yes. Yeah.
And at the end of the day, we can no longer blame somebody else. We need to look in the mirror.
So what would you say are some practical ways that we might break some of those patterns? And if we can focus, I mean, I was going to say if we can focus on kind of health.
Yes.
But of course, I imagine these practical recommendations you might share with us, can be applied to so many aspects of our lives.
Yeah, no, we can talk about health because in the book I list 50 and I go to finance, career, family, relationship, health. And if we're going to talk about the health, one of the examples, I mean, you said already, like they avoid going to the doctor, having their mammogram, having their physical, the blood test, all the stuff that they do that we avoid. Now, the first thing is to identify that we are self-sabotage. Because if we ask the woman, hey, you miss your pap smear, are you self-sabotage? I said, absolutely not. I had this, I had that, I had this, right? So the person has to identify that this is a form of self-sabotage. That's the first thing. And once we agree that, okay, maybe it could be a form of self-sabotage, they need to find the baseline. Normally, at the bottom of everything of self-sabotage is a feeling of undeservedness. And people say, oh, I deserve to go to the doctor. I deserve to go to the doctor. But it's not about that. Do you deserve the time to give to yourself, right? And then we start looking at the limiting beliefs, right? I don't like this doctor. The doctor is rude. I'm paying all this money for 5 minutes. So we start looking at this limiting beliefs. And once we have this limiting beliefs, is that true that the doctor's rude? Is that true that it's only really 5 minutes is not worth the time? And once you dismantle that, the best way to break it is what I call the pause system. I didn't come up with that, but it's a perfect system where you interrupt the pattern. Let's say that you have a doctor's appointment and you thank God these days they send you a little reminder Tuesday, 2 days before, because I am the number one person to write the right day and the wrong time. Right. So you can just push a C to confirm on your cell phone via text, done, right? So you're now going to cancel because, something come up. And before you cancel, if you stop, am I self-sabotaging here? Am I self-sabotaging? And the best way to stop is interrupting the mistake, which I call a mistake, but it could be the pattern, right? So the pause P is to identify the pattern. And it's just by asking the question, am I self-sabotage here in my health?
Am I constantly canceling appointments?
Yes, right. And if the answer is yes, right? So we're gonna go to the A. So acknowledge. All right. So I am doing it. I am doing. Then we go to the U, the pause. The letter U is to understand why. So why? I don't like this doctor. I am afraid of what they're gonna say. There is a fear there. There is definitely a fear if you can identify that. Then is the S, you select a different response. So you can book it or you can reschedule, but for another day. Like you don't, okay, I'm going to cancel, but not call them to reschedule. Because it could be that, that you have a different conflict that you must be there. Your job requires you to be there. You book this appointment and you just try to convince them. And then the last one is the E. The E of pause is you embrace yourself, right? If you went to the doctor, if you kept the appointment and went, acknowledge the self, just like a mother would, great job. And if you didn't, but you set up another one, understand that. And what I tell people to embrace themselves with a lot of compassion is, if that was my daughter who keep canceling the appointment or, don't even make the appointment, right? Which is even worse. So I don't tell them, oh, you are a horrible person. How could you do this? We don't do this. A good mother say, okay, something, we're going to do better tomorrow. I'm glad that you kept the appointment. If you cancel, I'm glad that you rescheduled the appointment for some day. And now you're going to protect the appointment. So what I notice, if you stop before you do anything and realize that, okay, this is sabotage. Is it sabotage? Is it? And that is the beginning of the healing path.
Thank you. Thank you. So I'm going to shift a little bit. Another one of your books is called The Umbrella Effect, A Journey of Self-Mastery for Women Leaders. Can you remind me when you wrote this book?
Oh my God.
What year was it published?
So it was published 24. It was October last year.
Your most recent one.
Okay. Most recent, yes.
So the description on Amazon is, quote, a fresh approach to leadership by integrating emotional intelligence, mindfulness, and self-care, helping you thrive both personally and professionally. I guess you've already explained to us how women leadership and power came into your life. I mean, it sounds like an extremely kind of personal journey of being surrounded by male power, not utilizing your own power, being disengaged from that for a variety of reasons. When did you what allowed you to have the courage to just say, I've had enough? Because so many of us are in that situation. I mean, in all arenas of one's life, right? So how did you decide to do power differently than what you were being exposed to and what was being demanded of you?
Yeah. That's a great question. I mean, really great question. Being in business for 35 years and as a, assistant and a manager, senior manager, director, senior director, regional director. So as I went through my career, I have to tell you, early in the beginning, I did not have the power. I knew that was wrong, but I did not have the skills, the capacity. And not until I got my last job that I retired from. And unlike a lot of people who did what I did, they always come and trash the company they work for. They were horrible people. That was not my case. It was the best company I ever worked for. They have a lot of resources. And yes, it was a male-dominated the way it was, but they were open to change. Every year we sat down and started talking about women that we could move forward for promotion, developed. And from the first 2 years that I was there, all the women that was on the pipeline got taken down. And new directors were part of the group now. And one day after, I tried to defend keeping the women that were there. And I lost. I was outvoted. And I was so angry. And I decided, and I always complained that every man in our group knew that I was always, feminist. That's what they call. He comes on a feminist.
Yeah, we get that label applied real quickly.
Yes. And at the end of that meeting, I went to my boss and I said, "Look, enough's enough. I want to create a class for women only. We're going to call it Women's Forum to develop them for promotions, managers to general managers to director." And, back then I had access to the company, and team members was 50-50 men and women. Then it got to managers, got to 60-40. Then it got to general managers was 70-30. And then it got to directors the number was ridiculous. It was 90 to 10%. And we need to move those numbers. The company also had realized, but I did not know then, that it was not only the company, because we need also to educate the women. We can't just promote you because you're pretty or because you're a female. You have to have the results.
Right.
So I came up with a program. We partner with HR. We created this program and we rolled. We started with 30 something, 32. We finished with 25, 26 or so. But we were able to promote within a year 65% of the group. And that was a tremendous success in the industry. And even there were 2 women that we had to convince her to take the promotion because she felt that she's going to be fired, she's not ready, all the things that they did. And one big piece was the confidence piece. Now, what I encourage people to do is, and this is what I taught the book, I went through everything else. Of course, you can't just read the book and become just master leader because there's a practice that grows that. But I talk about emotional intelligence, and not only women and men as well, has been a skill, one of the most valued skills for successful leaders. And in the book, I talk about the holistic leader, which is something like the transformational leader, but the difference is now including women ways of leading, because women were told to be a boss and too soft. I had even a boss who said, I hate when women said, "Oh, I'm treating the managers or the team members as a mother. They're like my kids." And he hated when he said that. And this is actually not a bad thing. That the empathy, the caring. Because especially now, if you have a generation working for you, probably from 18 to 29, if you don't show that care, they're not going to work for you. They're not going to work for people who they don't like. And they have to have some characteristics. Is wisdom, is actually sharing the leadership now. It's not that you're going to let them run the farm, but allow their ideas, allow their taking some steps. Don't have to be that micromanager. So there are a number of things that we need to do that is naturally for women to do. And that's why we need to get more women on board to take those positions.
Thank you. I want to kind of just shift to the person who is the leader, because thankfully more and more women are becoming leaders. And we are seeing them do power differently. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't help but think of my own background mm-hmm. and the world of medicine. And certainly for, centuries, the medical environs were very much a hierarchy. Physicians were on top and everybody else was underneath. And particularly patients were, the bottom of the rung. And, as a physician myself, there's benefits to that hierarchy and there are certainly challenges. And this might be stretching it a little bit well, let me keep going. So I was thinking about what it feels like to be a clinician in a small town. Mm-hmm. So there's a tremendous amount of overlap between my professional and personal personas. And again, that can be challenging sometimes and sometimes beneficial. I walk into a restaurant and somebody knows me and I might get a seat more easily. Oh, isn't that nice? At the same time, it's hard to go to the grocery store and not have people come up to me and talk to me about their pap smears. And I say this with great love and respect, but there's so much geographical overlap. Yeah. And I'm kind of interested in speaking about leaders and how they interface their private and personal lives. Because I think women might have to do it differently than men, but I'm not sure. And I'm wondering, how do we teach leaders how to embrace their own humanity, their own frailty? So, for example, doctors were trained to never get sick. And there was a certain amount of shame that if you got sick, you kind of never admitted it. You worked through 104 fever. You worked through intense pain. You always showed up. That's a problem because where that impacts is the capacity for self-care. I mean, it goes out the window. Physicians have never really been taught self-care. So I'm merging a lot of ideas right now. So it's just, I guess I want to talk about, so to those women out there who are leaders in any environment in which they lead, and whether it's in their home, whether it's in a business, or whether it's in a medical practice, whether it's being the leader of your own health. How do we help people ensure that they're getting self-care, giving them self-care? And how do we also remind them that they're human?
Yeah.
And that they can have faults and frailty and their own humanity?
I have to tell you, in the corporate America, what you experience in the health medicine, health world was exactly the same. You could not be calling out men or women, by the way, men or women. And they were healthy, but the problem became when they had children, because especially children who went to daycare, they get sick more often than children had stayed home. So women had been shamed to not take care of the kids, find a way. And when, especially in the private life, especially on the environments where I worked, if the child was sick, it was the woman who took the day off, not the guy, right? And there's no such a thing like that. Now, I think in the past 5 years or so, you could see some more of the men saying that, look, I have, my kids are sick, my wife cannot miss work, I have to come in. But they don't get the kind of backlash that women usually get just because the men barely does it, but the women are the ones has been doing this for all the time. Teaching them, and this is what I told my managers, your family is your priority, is your number one priority. It's not what companies wants to say out there, but that's the reality. Because if a company cannot respect the employees' well-being, they don't deserve to be working for them. That's how I feel.
Yeah.
And I never had issues towards the later part of my career, but early on I had, especially when the kids were little.
Yeah. I mean, I hear this so often. And, with the advent of paternity leave, family leave, there are more opportunities for male partners in heterosexual couples to take time. But yet still, I rarely hear my male friends lament that they had to leave work or miss work, where my women friends are certainly often saying it, and they feel really compromised because they're being asked to, again, kind of lead in their personal arenas and in their professional arenas. And it's really hard to do both. Really hard to do both. Yeah. And then, oh yeah, what about self-care? What about taking care of me in that process? Yeah. You mentioned emotional intelligence. Can you speak a little bit more about that? And I'm kind of curious, it's something that there's so much talk about how the millennials, kind of don't have grit, or they don't have perhaps the emotional intelligence that other generations have. And I don't know if that's true. I don't know. I guess I'd just love to hear your thoughts about kind of the generational phenomenon of emotional intelligence. And is grit a part of emotional intelligence?
Yes, definitely. Grit is part of emotional intelligence. But if people are calling the younger generation the millennials and the X's and Y's, the what is the new one? Millennials and there was a
Z's.
The Z's, yes. So I remember when I was 29 years old, I was starting my master's program, and I did this skills of leadership and emotional intelligence was part of it. And my emotional intelligence was minimal. Like embarrassing. And I don't even know what that number was.
Right.
But going through the class, you knew that, you got all your skills analyzed and measured and blah, blah, blah. So fast forward, I want to say maybe 15 years later, I took another assessment for was part of my company promotion and stuff. So I took an assessment and my emotional intelligence was pretty high. So did I spend 15 years working my emotional intelligence? Absolutely not. Now, there is something that comes with age, of course, but I think the biggest difference is because I meditated. There was no, I did some research. There was nothing else. There are people who can, work, but I never did work, weekly on emotional intelligence. Plus, is not buying a book and reading about emotional intelligence going to give you emotional intelligence. You have to be part of it. Now, what I learned, and even before the Generation Z and all the millennials, because I do have a Z and a millennial in my house, they think differently. Absolutely. They do I think that they have emotional intelligence? Yes. One of my daughters have more than the others. And is also depending on how on the event on their lives. We cannot expect the younger generation to do that, especially a generation that grew up through COVID, the lockdown. But one thing I learned before all of this came about is that children who do sports and learn how to lose because you cannot win every game, they develop better emotional intelligence. We're talking about that resilience, be able to. And nowadays, even before I left my company, there were a lot of younger people with anxieties at work, come in within an hour or two of work. They had to leave because they couldn't, something happened in their life. They were calling out. And let me tell you, we have to be responsible. We have to be resilient, and we have to, these days, leadership has to be able to engage with them and bring them up, right? And it's almost like a psychologist, a psychiatrist or so. We are not, leaders are not, but this has become part of their role, where you have to talk somebody off the ledge, and only good leaders can do that. And one of the things I say in my book, The Umbrella Effect, is there are 3 conditions for you to be a good leader. You must love people, you must love people, you must love people. Because if you don't, you're not going to have the patience. You're going to have the skills to work with them, because a leader is to guide somebody somewhere. Nobody's going to follow you. And in these days, you're probably giving them advice about their own personal lives. At least when I was still working, my manager was telling me, I don't know what to do. I spend half of my shift talking to people about their problems. And good leaders will do that. Anyway.
Yeah. What we're talking about as we come to a close is really the intersectionality of so many aspects of our lives, whether we're talking about self-care, well-being, health, leadership, power, mind, body, spirit, politics, family of origin, all these things. They it sounds a little naive, but I think what you're bringing out today is how important the context in which we live, where we come from, how we take care of ourselves, whether it's through meditation or keeping our appointments at the doctor's office, or how we teach others and embrace others. All these things are related. And, hopefully in a robust life, they're continuing to grow and evolve and change, and that we're all learning. But that what I wanted to bring forward today was how much the work that you do, everything about talking about self-sabotage, talking about leadership, talking about power, talking about how we are in the world as women, so impacts how we are in our own body.
Yeah.
And that living in the body is not an easy thing. It's not easy at all. And as you just described, particularly young women, they are dealing with a world that is really shifting and changing. And yes, I've had many people talk on GynoCurious about how the level of mental illness in young people is just is more prevalent than ever before. And it's not a surprise given all the tumult. And perhaps for other reasons that I don't know. But I guess I'd like you to just share with us, if you would, in conclusion, one, I want to make sure that people know how to get to your resources, but also some practical recommendations about how to integrate all of this and just some simple steps on how to make sure that those who are listening are taking better care of themselves.
Absolutely. You said something. When I was younger, early in my career, we always heard you need to leave your home from your life separate. Those days are over.
Yeah.
Those days are over. And I say this with a lot of grace for women to hear, because men, they can compartmentalize. Okay, my work is here, my life, my home life is here. But women, we can't do that, right? You can try, but that's not our natural way of being. So the first thing we need to do every time we're feeling like this pull, because it seems that we are being pulled in different directions, just take a breath.
Yeah.
3 breaths. I tell you, 3 breaths will reset your mind. Talking about emotional intelligence, 3 breaths will give you access to everything you read, everything you learn, just to get back to yourself.
And this is based on physiology. I'll remind everyone out there. Yes. We know this.
Yes. So 3 breaths, then make a decision. Feel your body. You have to be in your body. And sometimes we fight, but if you the first 3 breaths didn't work, take another 3 breaths, and so you can feel in your body and then make that decision. Now, women are so important. There's so much we need to do. And if anything, we gotta take care of ourselves and start early in the morning, the first thing that you do. Because if you get up in the morning and you go to your phone and your mind is racing with all your to-do list, your day is shot. Right? So take care of yourself in the morning. And if you don't have the time, I tell people, take a 5 minutes guided meditation in the shower. Just taking a shower, listening to the guided meditation, and your day can start. The best thing is 8 minutes anyway. Research have shown that if you meditate for 8 minutes, guided meditation to start, especially people who think, oh, I can't meditate it. It could be a prayer. It could be a moment of silence. My husband, he meditates by going to the woods, by hiking in green spaces. That's his spiritual practice. You have to have someone. Unless you are a black hole of the universe, you need 15 minutes. But most people need 8 minutes. 8 minutes a day just to start your day. So especially women, so you can attend to the children, you can attend to your friends, to your parents, to your work, to your career, and mostly to yourself. And when you do that first, you can prioritize your decisions so easily, because your doctor's appointment, your nutrition, your walking at the end of the day, your vegetables, your salad instead of the burger, those decisions become so easy to make because you understand that you are your number one priority and you deserve it,
Yeah. So I'd like to end GynoCurious interviews with asking my guests about pleasure. For too long, women haven't spoken about their pleasure. So if you were to mention one thing that just gives you pleasure and joy in your life, what might that be?
I tell you, going to the botanical garden.
That's great.
Going to the outdoor sculpture gardens. And it's so inspiring. And I would do this on a weekday. So I can really enjoy not too many people around, but that's what I love to do.
Oh, that's a lovely, I love that image of you walking through the garden. So I want to remind everyone I'm speaking to Ana Barreto, and in the show notes, her social media links will be there. And please look look up her books. There are a multitude of them. Thank you, Ana. I really appreciate you joining me today.
Thank you, Amy.
Yeah. And thank you to my co-producers, Jan Hammoud and Maddie Rosenberg, and to David Hoffman, my editor, and to the Epicurean for having us here at Radio Free Rhinecliff. Until our next episode, please stay well and listen to your instincts and intuitions. They are the greatest of teachers, not to be ignored.